Hello, viewers. Thank you for joining us for another segment of Camera On with Authors Inside. Today we have a guest from the East Coast, and this is my very first one, so I'm excited to hear what he has to say. But before we get started, can you hit the like button, subscribe, and hit the notification button? So how are you doing today?
I'm doing great.
Introduce yourself to our viewers.
Sure. My name's Kiongozi Lumumba.
Yeah, I'm
Come
Mosey
from New
Malumba.
Jersey.
You have something for sure?
Kiongozi.
Huh?
Yeah, Keon or Lumumba, either one. I'm
Okay, Keon. Keon. Okay, I go Keon. 'Cause that's a long name.
indeed it is.
Hey, Keon. Can you share with our viewers how long you've been incarcerated?
Well, out of my life, I did about 42 years in prison.
42 years in prison. And
Yeah,
can you share with us a little bit about your experience and your personal journey and how that experience shaped your perspective on life?
sure. I mean, I went to prison at a young age, at 18, and I was fortunate enough, I would say, not to be in prison, but to be amongst uh, guys that were in prison, lifers mainly, that were politicized. They were, political prisoners, prisoners of war, and they had revolutionary politics. And so the first thing that they did when I got to prison is, instead of introducing me to the weights or the basketball, they introduced me to the books, George Jackson, France for Nine, and Ivan Van Sertima. These are, the guys. They when the youth came into the prison system back in the day, we followed the lead of the older prisoners, the older lifers mainly.
Yeah,
So we didn't come in and set the rules. We followed the rules.
definitely. Hey, but look, hey, Keon, I want to ask you, what was your mindset during your incarceration?
My mindset during my incarceration was name, rank, serial number, try to escape. That's how I came into prison. That's where I started off at, right? And then as I began to learn and educate myself, and that was a period when I first went to prison, we were allowed to go to college in prison. So that's the first thing I did, following, the direction and lead of, my elders. I said, this is what I'm going to do. And one person sticks out is Reuben Hurricane Carter, his co-defendant, John Artis. He told me, he said, you can play basketball, you can lift weights and get big, right? Or you can come to the law library and try to get out. So he said, it's up to you, because nobody's going to do it for you. They might give you some direction, you got, a lot of jailhouse paralegals that may charge you an arm and a leg and don't get the job done.
Yeah.
Because
Hey, Keon, um, what led you to prison? What led you to gravitate to criminal activities? What led you to prison?
look, I came up in an era, right, where during the race riots throughout the entire country, and so when I first started off in that was the mindset. It was us against them. That was happening, all over the United States, but in New Jersey, particularly like North Camden, Trenton, they were like some of the largest cities that in the state here that where there was riots, and that was how I started off, and that's where I went. I joined the class, that just went against the system.
Okay, so that was your mentality, just going against the system,
Absolutely, absolutely.
and you kept that
Had,
same
had
mentality while you was incarcerated.
as I began to educate myself or politicize myself and become familiar with all the different aspects of the system, right, and how it operates at different times. The then it became a different thing. If particularly when it came to the our community, when it came to our community, if I began to think that if I couldn't contribute something to it, right? Either some knowledge or something material. If I can't contribute to the community, then I'm part of the problem. So
Indeed,
that's
indeed.
when I began to think of ways that I could improve the community that I came from.
Definitely.
And then
So so while you was in prison, what was your turning point? What was your aha moment made you to turn things around and start to want to educate yourself?
I think it's the people. It's the people. Like when I first got to Trenton State Prison, Asada Shakur's co-defendant was there. Mutula Shakur, he was there, and he was a big influence on the entire prison population. And there was others. At any given time, there's always in the prison system, there's always a few individuals that stand out for whatever reason, whether they stand up to the administration, whether they provide information, knowledge, right? They contribute. And
Yeah.
so that was my turning point, right? Like I said, in meeting and walking the yard with, guys that had 37 years in at the time. I couldn't imagine when I got in it with 1 year in, I couldn't imagine doing 37 years.
Yeah. Yeah. Hey,
And keep,
so hanging out with people who was influential in prison, they kind of like steered you in a way to get your education.
absolutely, absolutely. That's
Yeah.
where it came from. And
Okay.
at the
Okay.
time when I first went to prison, like the guys that educated themselves, right? Believe it or not, about a lot of them got hired by the Department of Corrections. Like the guy that started the Joint Connection, which is a bus service that takes the families to the various prisons on Saturdays and Sundays, visiting days. He was he had just got out and he got a grant from the Department of Corrections and started a bus service to take families to see their loved ones.
Hey, Keon, thank you for sharing that, man. Here at Arthur's Inside, that's the name of our organization. We produce hope, healing, reform, and reduce recidivism. And I want to ask you, based on your experience, what do you think is the best way to curb average youth coming inside prison?
I think I would start with Frantz Fanon's quote, right, from Wretched of the Earth. He said, it's incumbent upon each generation to discover their own realities and come up with their own solutions, right? So starting with that though, right, I would also say that if they have more contact, there's a great disconnect now from generation to generation. Um, so that disconnect has to be bridged, right? So that there's a more of a connect between generation to generation where information and knowledge can be passed on. And so there's no places where people from these different generations interact or come into contact with each other.
Yes.
Unless you're on the streets involved in whatever, you know what I'm saying? You don't have really any contact with the other generation. And so that's what has to be bridged. And, I think some of the ways to bridge that is, through community action. Community action is probably like one of the best ways to bridge that gap, because then they begin to see, like with me, right? Because I learned law in prison and then brought it to the streets. And so I built a reputation that I get results and I get the results. And that gave me access to a lot of the youth of the day, or the next generation. It gave me access to them and it gave me the ability to talk to them, and I look at things from their point of view. And then in looking at things from their point of view, if I see a flaw in it, then I give them my point of view and tell them why I think that's flawed. And
Nice, nice. Yeah, good word, good word. So look, hey, Keanu, I'm gonna take you back. If you could talk to your 9-year-old self, what would be your message to your 9-year-old self?
That I probably should have listened to my uncle or my elders, right? And my uncle, right, he was a pro fighter, and he went to prison. He was in prison with back in the day with Pretty Boy Floyd, Babyface Nelson. He was in prison with all those old gangsters. And he told me, he said, man, he said, boy, he said, you're gonna wear out before that steel and concrete wear out. If I had to listen to that, right, it probably would have saved me a lot of grief. But on the same token, probably at a very young age, right, when I was in a youth reformatory, a psychologist, right, had told me after talking to me, and it took me years. It always stuck in my head, and but it took me years to see what he was saying, right, or why he would say that. And what he said was, he says, "You're gonna be one of them guys that do life on the installment plan." Right. So, and I was like, what do you mean I'm gonna do life on the installment plan? Right. I understood what he meant, but I was like, how did he come up with that? What is it? I mean, we only talked for 10 minutes. How did he come up with that? Right. And as a psychologist or counselor, why didn't he have any suggestions to change that course? And then I understood that that's not why they were there, to change that course. He didn't have a problem with me doing life installment plan because it didn't affect him.
Exactly.
So so it was based on basically is the decisions that I would make over the years would determine whether or not I would do life on installment plan. And some decisions were good decisions, some decisions were bad, and I did more than life on the installment plan.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yeah,
But
40 years. 4 years is a long time.
yes, it is. It's a long time, but I always did it with the mindset that I never allowed myself to become institutionalized. I always did it with the mindset that I kept the streets, the community, I kept that in sight at all times. That's I never got deep into the prison system, like where I never wanted to fix a cell up to look like a fancy house, and I wasn't a cell is a cell, so I accepted that. And so my whole goal every time, while I was doing time, was to get out. That was it, because there's no life inside. It's a lot of wasted life inside.
Yes.
So
Okay. Thank you, man. Thank you for sharing. Let me ask you, can you share with our viewers, if you were to say what's the most violent experience you saw in prison?
the most violent, the very first day I got to prison, I just got my state issues, right? You come in prison, right? You get your state issues. And I seen a guy get murdered, right? And he got murdered with Shank, right? Just two guys murdered. He had informed on these two brothers, and then ended up getting life itself for some years later, a couple years later. Anyway, it was so swift and so vicious that it was a guard standing right there. He went in the shop. He didn't know who did it. That's how they got found not guilty at trial, because the guard couldn't identify who did it. But that was probably, I've seen a lot of stuff. I've seen guys boil because they had hot pots and stuff. So I've seen them boil oil and different concoctions and throw it on people. I've seen guy take a can top and cut a guy's throat. I've seen all kinds of violence. I've seen a guy get stabbed on a weight bench all the way to the knife was stuck in the wood of the weight bench. So
Yeah. And the reason I asked you that, it's not to boast about prison, because we know prison wasn't cool. It was depressing and demoralizing. We just want these
right.
these youngsters to know that there was nothing cool about prison.
Nothing at all. I mean, when my last 8 years in prison was spent in solitary confinement. I was in the management control unit. Um, the management control unit is, where they stick prisoners that are either political or pose a problem to the administration of the prison, right? So, and you're locked in your cell 24 hours a day. You come out every 3 days on a rooftop for an hour. You don't mix with the general population.
Yeah.
And I used to watch guys. You're in the cell by yourself. And I used to
Yeah.
watch guys that I knew very well, but I knew guys that I knew for 15, 20 years. And I would see them clean their cells. Now, you're the only person in the cell. I would see them clean their cells with soap and water every day, like wipe the walls down, pack everything up, put it on the bed. And that was the first sign that they were breaking down, that they were about to go insane. And I
Yeah.
seen some good dudes because of that went crazy and had to then once they you go and get on medication and stuff, it's downhill. It's a book right on a psychologist from Marion Federal Penitentiary. It's called Breaking Men's Minds, right? And it's about the deliberate placement of prisoners in solitary confinement, right? And keeping track of their communications with anybody outside their unit. And what they normally try to do, one of the methods that they use is they take the weakest prisoner and they'll put him around the strongest prisoners, right? And to break down the stronger prisoners. So instead of the weaker one adapting to the ways of the stronger prison, the stronger prison eventually starts to break down and compromise.
No,
And
that's interesting. That's very interesting. Yeah.
right. And the guy that wrote it, Dr. Shockley, an avowed racist, he wrote it. He wrote the book, and this is what he said: how to break prisoners, how to break the minds,
Here,
breaking men's minds.
yeah, here in California, what you described about the solitary confinement for 24 hours and an hour on the roof.
Mm.
Here in
Right,
California, that's the segregated housing unit. We call that the SHU.
right. Special housing unit, right.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, segregated housing unit, and we call that the SHU. SHU program.
Gotcha.
That's
Right,
acronym for SHU. SHU.
right,
Yeah. So yeah, that's the same shit. That's something similar. Same. California has the same thing.
right, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, like in New Jersey, it's funny, right? Because in New Jersey, right, all the most of the prisoners that became politicized uh, on the conditions in our communities and on the prison system, it came from George Jackson out of California. He
Yeah.
was that Blood in My Eyes,
Yeah.
Soledad Brothers. He wrote a few books, but that's a lot of the brothers here on the East Coast gravitated towards him
Okay.
or towards the message that he carried,
Hey, Keon.
particularly yes, sir.
Yeah, not to cut you off. Apologize about that, brother. But
Yeah, that's
while you
fine.
was
That's fine.
while you was incarcerated, did you lose any family members?
I lost my father. I lost a lot of family members, and in order to deal with it, right, you kind of shut down, right, so you don't feel it. And probably one of the tragedies is that if you practice that one time, it becomes easier the second time, and by the third time, it becomes permanent, and then it becomes part of your psychological makeup. So now today, like when there's a tragedy, there's very little emotional reaction from me, and that's because of the years of confinement that I spent and how I dealt with it then.
Okay.
The
Okay.
grieving, there is no grieving process.
Yeah. So let me ask you this: how long you been out now, Keon?
I got out in 2012, 2012.
And how has your
And
how has your transition been since you've been home?
it's been, up and down. I mean, for me, it's easy to navigate, right? The economic and political system set up in this country. It's kind of easy, right? I don't find that very difficult. In fact, I find it kind of boring, right? But there are, I mean, some people, like a lot of people that they come out, like some of the basic stuff on getting the ID, getting a driver's license, finding employment. Even now here in New Jersey, right? Even parolees can vote. You can be on probation and parole and vote. So ex-offenders can vote, right? They haven't organized to the extent of becoming a voting bloc, which they are, if they would just come together. And so laws like right now, there's a lot of drug recovery laws, right? So instead of sending guys to prison for using drugs and committing crimes, they put them in programs or on drug court. And but that could have happened a lot sooner.
Yeah, Keon, I think I want to. What has been your biggest challenge since you've been home?
Biggest challenge is in reaching out to other people. Wanting for my brother what I want for myself is sometimes it's hard to reach other people because some of the shortcuts we learn, right? Some of the shortcuts are temporary though, and even when guys take shortcuts, sometimes they don't set up structures or institutions that can carry to the next generation. And that's one of the reasons I believe personally that why there's a disconnect from generation to generation, because at the end of the day, right, you can only judge a man or a woman by the tools that they leave their offspring, the next generation. If you don't leave them any tools, right, you haven't done anything. And so why should they respect you? Like when you look at the Rockefellers, right? They left enough tools for their offspring and their lineage to stay in position for the next 100 years. If the old saying is, I'm a ditch digger, so my son can be a doctor, so his son can be a philosopher. Which meaning, like each generation, getting better. But they have tools. You have to leave them the tools. If they don't have the tools, then you haven't done anything.
Well said. So well said. Good nuggets, man. Well said. Hey, I was going to ask you, what are you most grateful for?
I'm most grateful for that I'm able to eat real food. Now, I'm grateful for that. My daughters. I'm grateful for family. There's even though family goes through ups and downs, right? I'm really grateful for that, and the support that I get, and good friends. I've met some good people along the way. I've met people that I'm closer with than I am with my blood siblings, and that's because we have a common bond. We have something in common. We see the same thing. We see that that there's a need for an upliftment of people, our people in particular. Right? It's after I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
No, I didn't. No, I was listening to you. I didn't interrupt. I didn't want to interrupt you. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah. There's a need for upliftment, right? And when people have that same vision, right, that they want more for themselves, that they want more for their people, you know what I'm saying? That you have something to struggle for. If you have something to struggle for, you have a reason for living. And
yeah. So the brotherhood that you were able to have along the way, you carry that with you today. That you established along the way through your experience, you carry that with you today to keep you going.
Absolutely. That's why I'm like, I'm willing to give 200% to help somebody that needs help because it was given to me.
Definitely, and you're grateful for that.
Yeah, because I entered prison at a time where the riots on our communities on the street were followed by riots in prison. That was a natural thing. So the time that I'm in prison, prisons were very violent as opposed to being locked down. You go in the mess hall, there's 600 men in the mess hall. I've seen, all kinds of stuff happen, and I was fortunate enough, you can be the biggest, baddest dude in the world, right? But if you stand alone, it don't matter. You can be taken down. But
definitely.
But when you come from a collective and you think, these are people that have a positive motivation, right? They then you earn the respect of people. And believe it or not, a lot of people think that it may be better to be feared, but it's better to be respected. It's going to carry you further if you're respected than feared.
Hey, Keon, thank you for dropping those nuggets. What's your spiritual belief?
I'm Muslim.
Okay. Is that what helped you get through your prison experience?
No, I didn't practice Islam in prison. I didn't practice Islam in prison because I never wanted to just first of all, I didn't think that a lot of people joined like the Nation of Islam at the time. Was when I entered prison, was very few people were familiar with the Sunnah. We followed Elijah Muhammad, right, in the prison systems then, right, in the early days. And I didn't need to be in any group for protection or anything. I didn't need that, and so until I didn't actually start practicing Islam until I was released from prison. Even though, I prayed in prison, but I didn't start practicing until I was released because I felt that I had a more genuine reason for doing it.
Okay. Have you ever practiced Christianity?
I'm sorry, say it again.
I said, have you ever practiced Christianity?
Of course, at my age, you couldn't help but that's what we came up in, and we came up with that from the family, and today, I recognize the Esau, Jesus, as a prophet. No, and in Islam, no prophet, even though Prophet Muhammad is the seal of the prophets, he's regarded no more or no less than Esau than Jesus.
Okay.
That's
Okay. Thank you for sharing, man. Hey, Keon, man, I really appreciate you joining us tonight, man. It's a privilege having you on our show.
I thank you, man. I appreciate it very much.
Hey, Keon,
I hope somebody from the other generation got one thing out of it. That's enough.
Definitely. I was going to ask you before we go, is there anything last thing you'd like to say?
Last thing I'd like to say is that, what I started with, France for 9, it's incumbent. Each generation has to look at their own realities and come up with some solutions. If you don't come up with a solution, you're part of the problem.
Indeed.
Because we definitely in some trying times.
Well said. You right about that, man. You dropped some nuggets on us, man. I appreciate you, man, and you're welcome to join us anytime, man. Come on back.
All right, brother. Thank you very much.
Hey, you have a good evening, man.
All right, you too. All right, brother.
Camera off.